you were Mayco of the DA at some point.
Yeah.
Why did you leave?
The funders or the owners wanted their party back, and I became increasingly unpopular. It's dangerous. I mean, I think we're seeing it more now, with some parties unable to condemn the genocide in Gaza, for example, because funders are saying, no, stay away from that issue. I mean, even Helen is tiptoeing around that issue. That starts with believing that you fight crime with boots on the ground. They've put 1,200 extra boots on the ground in the crime hotspots with the promise that they would halve the murder rate in 10 years. 10 years is coming up in 3 years' time. The number of murders, actual numbers of murders, have gone up every year since that project started.
How about just building a wall on there too?
I was waiting for that. It is the maddest political decision ever. I've been tackling Helen lately because she's pointing out all these faults in Johannesburg.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, but you were mayor in Cape Town for 3 years. Okay, you led a coalition government, but it was a DA-led government. And then you were Premier of the Western Cape for 10 years. And for 10 years, you had an outright majority.
Yeah.
And you didn't fix the same things that you're pointing out in Johannesburg. She went to the hostels, the migrant labor hostels, and spoke about the terrible conditions.
Yeah.
I must take you to the hostels here on the Cape Flats. The terrible conditions that people live in, that if she was really cared about those conditions, she had 13 years to fix them, and nothing has changed.
Today we're asking, what does Centre Party actually mean? How do you build one? And in a polarized country like South Africa, can it actually hold? This is the Politically Aweh podcast. I am KG Mokgadi. Let's get away. Comrades, we are hanging out with the former Mayco of the city of Cape Town, the current SG of the Good Party, Brett Herron. Welcome.
Thank you, KG.
But you're looking so chilled. I was expecting very politician, but you look like you're going to Long Street after this.
Well, maybe I am going to. No, I've got some meetings today, but I mean, this is the way I am almost every day.
You've built quite a following on TikTok without having to do a single dance. Do you see it as connecting with an audience or connecting with voters?
Well, I guess hopefully the audiences are also voters. So it's an important tool for connecting, I've noticed. I mean, the connection is much quicker.
Yeah.
And you get to tell the story. And for those who listen, I'm a long-form TikToker, so people have to sit for 5-10 minutes to get the full story. But it's interesting, the feedback. I'm enjoying it.
I haven't seen you do like one Rocco Mama's challenge, one dance, nothing.
No.
How come? Like, don't you think that would give you more members?
It's you know what? For me, it's about authenticity. Am I authentically that person? And I'm not. So I'm there to mostly share some serious stuff.
But who is Brad Herron authentically?
I'm a serious person, so that's my problem. I'm a serious person.
Real?
Yeah, I'm serious. So when I tackle something, it's a serious issue, and I'm serious about it. And so to go and do the Rockamama's challenge just would be weird for me. Although I wouldn't mind going hanging out there and having a drink. I mean, I'm not that serious.
Well, how is politics in the age of social media?
It's a crazy space. I mean, look, politics is a crazy space anyway, and in South Africa maybe even more so.
Yeah.
But in social media, it's a crazy space, you know, the trolling is unbelievable. There's no space for there's not a lot of accommodating of the stuff that I put out. And so I have to tell my mother, don't read the stuff, because she gets very upset with the trolling, and I tell her, listen, I don't even read most of it, so you don't have to read it.
You were Mayco of the DA at some point.
Yeah.
Why did you leave?
Well, I mean, why did we go there first? We went there under specific agreement when the Independent Democrats, who I was part of, merged with the DA.
Yeah.
And that was it was summed up in 4 terms: redress, reconciliation, delivery, and diversity.
Yeah.
And for the first few years, they sort of allowed me to push the agenda and do the work that I wanted to do. And then after the 2016 elections, everything changed. I guess the funders or the owners wanted their party back, and I became increasingly unpopular, and the stuff that I wanted to do was being blocked. So I was going out to communities, promising them things that I was working on, and then thinking that I had the backing of the caucus and the party, but I didn't. I mean, Helen Zille told me when I was working on this affordable housing projects in this area where we are now, in Woodstock, Salt River, she told me no, but using well-located land is over-subsidizing the poor. So I was like,
oh,
that was the end.
But how much say do funders have in political parties?
I learned in the Democratic Alliance how much say they have, and it's dangerous. I mean, I think we're seeing it more now, with some parties unable to condemn the genocide in Gaza, for example. Unable, maybe not unwilling, but unable, because funders are saying no, stay away from that issue. I mean, even Helen is tiptoeing around that issue. So funders are dangerous. In the ideal world, there would be no private funding of political parties. There should be state funding. But we don't live in that ideal world. But the influence of funders across the universe is there to see.
I mean, some people who criticize you, they just say, like, you're a hater. You're just hating on the DA. Is this true? Like, or what do you say to the people that say, nah, Brett Herron is just hating on the DA?
Yeah, I mean, I get it. I got it. I was in a little Twitter spat yesterday with someone about one expat and they said, DA's bad. That's your brand. And I was like, actually, no, these are the facts. Helen Zille says ideology doesn't matter. Vote for me for, like, fixing potholes. But here in the city of Cape Town, where DA governs, you're selling off all of our assets. And when I criticize that, it's not bad versus good. I'm exposing your ideology. This is your ideology that things must be privatized to happen. And so my view is, if you're saying that your government cannot deliver, then you're conceding that your government isn't as good as you claim it to be. You need the private sector to do the delivery. So I get into those arguments. It's not about hating on the DA, but I'm obviously very attuned to their style of governing, having been there. I live in the Western Cape. I serve in the Western Cape Provincial Parliament, where the DA is in government. So a lot of my criticism is part of what I do as an opposition member, and I'm trying to move the needle. I'm trying to move them to not just talk about affordable housing, which they now include in their language, which they never did before, and I will take some credit for that. But now just saying everything is affordable, but nothing is built, that's the next fight. So it's not hating on the DA, it's trying to make life better for people who live here.
It's not normal to hear a white guy talk about privatization not being all good.
Yeah.
This is not it's not a normal white guy thing to say. What are some of the benefits or pros and cons of privatization that people don't think about?
So for me, the con the reasons why I'm not a big supporter of privatization as the solution for everything is that the people who rely on government the most are the ones who cannot afford for government services to be privatized. So in South Africa, our inequality and our poverty and our and the destitution of the majority of South Africans means that if a service is privatized, the private operator is expecting to make a profit, which means that there's a cost involved for the end user. Whereas if the state is the provider of those services, the service is subsidized. So there's that argument that privatizing everything is an exclusionary practice. It excludes the majority of South Africans who will not be able to afford to go to the Belleville Velodrome and use it, because it's now a concert venue for people who can pay a couple of $100 to see a musician. And the Good Hope Centres, which is where things like the Cape Town International Jazz Festival was incubated, is now sold. So how does a small entrepreneur wanting to start a big event access an affordable venue in order to launch their project? So privatization has a cost implication for people. Where it may work, for example, the rail service. Now, we have a commuter rail service in Cape Town, Metro Rail, and my idea was always that the city should own the network.
Yeah.
And Metro Rail is an operator of trains, but it can only provide 80 trains currently in Cape Town. We need at least 120. So now we must go out on tender and find 40 an operator that can provide 40 trains and pay them a fee. So that kind of privatization, where you're supporting or complementing government services, is the pro.
Should policing belong to the city as well?
I'm not a big fan of this devolution argument for policing.
Yeah.
And we've already seen you see the tensions already between South African police services and the city of Cape Town's Metro Police and law enforcement and their 25 units and stuff. So I think that there can be greater operational leadership or oversight in the provincial space, and possibly the city of Cape Town or all cities could get more policing functions. But devolution completely, I don't think is the solution.
But the city is arguing, hey man, it's difficult to fight crime because we are not in control of the policing.
Yeah, but that starts with believing that you fight crime with boots on the ground. And we've already seen, the provincial government has funded this thing called LEAP.
Yeah.
These enhanced law enforcement auxiliary program. That's LEAP, what LEAP stands for. So that they've put 1,200 extra boots on the ground in the crime hotspots, with the promise that they would halve the murder rate in 10 years. 10 years is coming up in 3 years' time. The number of murders, actual numbers of murders, have gone up every year since that project started. So there's more boots on the ground that haven't changed a thing. Now, we've had the South African National Defence Force out on the Cape Flats in 2019, 2020.
Yeah.
We have them again. That's more boots on the ground. Certainly didn't solve the gangsterism and the crime problem. So if you start with a boots on the ground philosophy for solving crime, you're never going to solve it. Your solving of crime, you have to deal with the built environment conditions. The crime is not happening where it's happening by coincidence.
Yeah.
It's happening where people were forced when they were forcefully removed under the Group Areas Act. It's happening in the townships that were created by the apartheid state, where there was underinvestment, ghettoization. So you have to look at those conditions and say, we have to fix these.
How about just building a wall on the
N2? I was waiting for that.
How about just building a wall? End-to-edge projects. Talk to me about. I know you've got feelings about that. I know you've got real feelings about that.
It is the maddest political decision ever, and it's a political decision that's not new.
Yeah,
it was something that some people in the DA wanted even when we were there, when I was there.
Oh, and for real?
They wanted this wall, and a wall. In my experience, a wall's never solved crime. First of all, wall has got ends.
Yes.
So, if you're really determined to get around it or over it, it's got ends.
Yeah.
But you know what? There's an interesting thing. There's an interesting urban thinking or philosophy called crime prevention through environmental design.
Okay.
And Cape Town implemented its own version of that in 2011, 2012. It was finalized in 2015, called violence prevention through urban upgrade. In Khayelitsha, in Makaza and Khayelitsha, where they upgraded walkways, put lighting in, they built the most beautiful library, community facilities, sports facilities. So they invested, with the help of the German Development Bank, hundreds of millions of rands in investing in Makaza and in Khayelitsha to challenge the idea that, or to demonstrate the idea that upgrading urban environments helps prevent crime. So there you've got this perfect example, which you never ever replicated. And so the solution to the Hell Run, as it's called, the N2, is not to build a wall. That war is, if they genuinely believe it's about crime, then you need to solve the conditions in which people live.
But why do you think they went with a war?
I think some people in the city believe that wars are crime deterrents. I don't believe that. And then obviously the the impact of the visuals of a failing government is this kilometers and kilometers of informal settlements. Some parts of the road, when you're driving on it, you see the portable toilets that people have to use. So there's a huge visual impact, which I think is partly why some people in the Democratic Alliance government support this idea of a war, because it will hide all that. And then I really do believe there's some people who think that the crime is coming from those communities and we must contain them behind this wall.
You've said that voters are becoming increasingly disillusioned with politics. Why is that?
For many reasons, but I guess the main reason is nothing has changed for them. I mean, for the vast majority of South Africans since 1994, not much has changed. The vote, the right to vote was there. Our constitution is a mandate, I think, for government to do some stuff, a lot of stuff, and we've got to drag the government to court to get them to do it. Like, it's not, for me, that Chapter 2 of the Constitution, which is our Bill of Rights, is a manifesto. It says people should not go hungry, but people are starving. I mean, over 50% of the Western Cape population is food insecure. Now, must we drag the government to court to force them to introduce a feeding scheme? I mean, the famous housing case, the Grootboom case, someone had to go to court to force government to make housing a progressive right. So I understand why people are disillusioned, and I even understand why people are critical of the Constitution, because it's heralded as this very progressive document but government should see it as a manifesto, as its mandate. These are the things we must do. But instead they get dragged to court to force them to do it.
Well, where's the failure? Why is government not getting it right? Where's, like, as a politician who can see, who's been in the meetings, in the negotiations, where's the failure? Where's government failing to do the thing?
So government is not this thing over there. It's it's government is political party elected into office. That's the government. The administration must implement the government's policies. So we must start by, are we electing the right people? Are we electing people with capacity, with ethics, with the commitment to the outcomes that we want to see as a country? And we're probably electing the wrong people, because the laws are in place, the Constitution is there, but where's the political direction and leadership telling the administration this is the priority? Because being in government is about making choices all the time. You've got a budget, you've got a fixed envelope budget. Now, how you allocate that budget is a political choice. And so I think the failure is in the choices we make, and the people who are making the choices are largely disconnected from what the kind of outcomes I would like to see.
What do you make of the ANC as opposition in the Western Cape?
Look, I mean, I have a good relationship with the members of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament, the ANC members. But the ANC in many of the legislatures around the province, the city of Cape Town, they're weak. And they don't hold government up to account like robustly, or they haven't read the documents, or they haven't followed the story from the beginning. So there's like an opportunism often to their opposition. They've caught a little story and then they run with it, and they don't have like the history and the detail and stuff to really make an impact or to even influence government. Because as an opposition, you can influence government if you know your stuff, and even a small one person that's sitting in the parliament, I can do it.
Are you saying it feels like they don't know their stuff?
it feels like they don't care to know their stuff sometimes. Yeah, I think the writing is on the wall that I mean, even in government, do they know their stuff? I mean, do they?
Yeah, I suppose that's where I'm going.
Yeah,
like-
I mean, so if you don't know your stuff, if you're not really committed to the outcomes, committed to certain outcomes, you've gone into office saying, I want to make this kind of change, and this is what motivates me. Then being in opposition, like you're going to cruise if you can.
Good Party, Rise Mzansi, Bosa. I mean, that was supposed to be a beautiful threesome of like the centrists, right? Like, what happened?
Well, the idea of consolidating like-minded parties is something that I think is important to happen.
Yeah.
The project was much more complicated than I think we went into it with when we went into it with the idea that we could simply just do this. And these talks started in earnest, and we've had them over the last few years. But I mean, like really in earnest in March last year. So it's been a year-long process.
Yeah, we thought it was a done deal.
And I mean, I also thought it was a done deal.
Yeah.
But it became increasingly clear that it was much more complicated. And I'm not sure that
Who
I
was
want to
the
be.
problem? We're all friends here. It was Musi, wasn't it?
You know what? Well, let me go back to your framing about the centrists thing.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we signed an agreement that we were going to be social democrats, not centrists.
Okay.
So, I mean, there were some tensions around what issues are important, what the solutions are, but largely it was about integrating structures and activists and supporters around one new entity. We named the entity. In fact, we put out the media statement that we're going to contest separately at like 3:00 on Sunday, the 12th of April.
Yeah.
And at 3:05 on Sunday, the 12th of April, I got the registration certificate from the IEC saying Unite for Change is now a registered political party. 5 minutes later. Yeah. So, but you know what the reality is? If you go on the ground and you go knock on doors in the Western Cape, and you ask people who's, anything, do they know about the Good Party? We've developed recognition in this province largely, and smatterings of recognition outside of the province. And so with 6 months before the election, introducing a new brand, I think was going to be confusing for voters.
Yeah.
But the project still remains important.
You were in the negotiations for the GNU. How is that going? Has the GNU benefited smaller parties?
Look, I mean, the GNU is a coalition, and my complaint about the GNU is that it is cabinet-led. And I raised this. I happened to go to the GNU Leaders Summit because Patricia de Lille was out of the country, so I represented Good at the Leaders event. And I raised it there that the GNU is cabinet-led rather than political party-led.
Yeah.
So the statement of intent that we signed said that we would have a multi-party, the coalition like Lekgotla, and work out the governing program that we would all agree on. But actually the cabinet went off and did that. And we must also remember that Rise Mzansi is in the GNU, but not in the cabinet. The UDM you mentioned hasn't got a cabinet minister, it's got a deputy minister. Al Jamar's got a deputy minister. So the cabinet doing it sort of irks me a little that it's not a political party coalition.
Yeah.
It's still cabinet-led. The impact on the smaller parties, it remains to be seen. I mean, we also need to now see what happens in 2026. It's given some parties the opportunity to have a profile as being in government. We were part of government, not as part of a GNU, but the tradition of the ANC inviting an opposition party into their cabinet. We were in cabinet in 2019 to 2024. And I mean, we didn't perform well in 2024. So I'm not sure if that's because we were in cabinet or because we were crowded out by a whole lot of new parties like Bosa, like Rise. So we lost some of our voters to them. So it's a good question. I don't know the answer to that.
the benefit of anti-pat as a veteran politician. What's that? What's the benefit like?
Well, I mean, obviously
She's been in the game.
She knows the game. She's been in the game. She's got massive name recognition, and but she'll be the first one to tell you that name recognition does not translate into support. So people may know her and stop her in the street and greet her, but she understands it doesn't necessarily mean that they support her. But she brings a wealth of experience, instant recognition, and within our own party's dynamics, like you can't buy that experience. The experience of pre-1994, the struggle against apartheid, the transition which she was part of, the writing of many of those laws that we now use in our country. She knows all of that stuff. And I saw it most clearly when she was mayor, because the administration would often like to tell politicians, no, you can't do that because this law says so. And then she'll say, but I wrote the law. The intention of the law was not to do that. So bring it. Come and tell me which section in the law says I can't do this.
Yeah.
So we're very lucky to have her.
Yeah. I mean, like, we have got a lot of older politicians in the country. And then we've got guys such as yourself that are still energetic. Should we be getting politicians to retire at normal retirement age like other jobs? Like, why do politicians get to work until they are 90, but other people work until 65?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's a huge need, not only just in South Africa, but across
the continent,
across the world.
Yeah.
I mean, that the boomers make room for the next generation. So I think there is that need. And maybe it will help us with the alienation that many young people feel about politics and politicians. So the thing about politics is that, I mean, first of all, there's no qualification. Anyone can be a politician. So there's no barrier to entry. And many people sort of reach their peak in politics in their 60s and 70s. That's when they become presidents and ministers and stuff. So it's an interesting question about how the rise and fall of a politician if they're career politicians. There are also people who enter politics late. They've had other careers and they enter, something makes them enter. So retirement age is something that probably is anti-democratic in a way. Why shouldn't an 80-year-old be able to put their hand up and say, I want to stand?
Because they're 80.
Yeah, but if they've got a constituency, if they've got why can't the elderly be represented in parliament?
Because they're 80, they should play with the kids, right? Like, I mean,
yeah. No, I'm not disagreeing with you, but I think it's a question about how does democracy work, and democracy has an entry point. You have to be 18 to be a voter, and therefore you have to be 18 to be elected. But democracy is about representation of people's values and interests. And if someone who's 80 years old stands up and says, I'm for the elderly party, then why can't they be represented?
Do you often sit there and think to yourself, man, if I had stayed in the DA, I would have been Minister of Home Affairs?
I've never. I don't think of it. I don't regret leaving the DA because the compromise was just the compromise that I was being asked to make was too much, and I didn't get into politics because I needed a job. I mean, my business was a huge sacrifice to do this. So it's not about being the minister at any cost.
But elections are coming up. Rent in Cape Town is going to be a huge discussion.
Yeah.
We had the mayor here, and the mayor made the argument like, hey man, I live in Edgemead, like I don't feel entitled to places closer to the city, that kind of thing. What do you make of that? I think, like, I don't think people feel entitled to live in Camps Bay.
No.
But come on, Woodstock. Like what do you make? What do you make of such views from the mayor?
So I mean, that's again where Helen is wrong when she says political ideology's got no role to play in local government.
Yeah.
And that's a sort of typical Hill Lewis liberal ideology. But it's more important than whether people feel. I agree with you. I don't think people living in a shack think they should be living in Camps Bay in a 40 million rand house.
Yeah.
But I think we've got a history that in our country that you can't ignore. That history, the history is based on a spatial. I mean, apartheid was basically spatial. I mean, we had to separate people, and physically. So you had to live there, I had to live here. You could go to that beach, I could go to this beach. So there's a duty to overcome that spatial legacy, which means the people that were living in Woodstock that were forcefully removed should be allowed to come back. Maybe not the people that were moved, but the fact that Woodstock was a diverse community and is close to the city center, and people of color were living there.
Yeah.
So there's a historical component to this argument that the mayor misses, and there is a duty, and the Constitutional Court has now said it. There's a duty on the state to redress the apartheid spatial plan. So it's not about anybody's feeling entitled to be in a particular area. It's about the justice of redressing a practice that was devastating to people, put them in conditions where they live in ghettos. And so there's two parts to it for me. I mean, housing has been something that's worried me for a long time.
Yes.
But I mean,
you were in housing, right?
I was in housing not long enough to make. I was there for 2 years, and then I was causing too much trouble, and that's where the trouble. That's why I had to leave. But I mean, and we'll come back to that. I mean, there was the identification of land in Woodstock and Salt River when I was in that housing space, and it was Jordan Lewis, who was not yet mayor, who took me to a party funder. They wouldn't meet. He in the Democratic Alliance, if you manage a fund, if you bring in a funder, you manage that funder through their lifetime as a donor.
Okay.
So you go every year and you knock on the door and ask for money. And this donor wouldn't meet with Jordan. He was managing them. He was their fund. He was their. They were his fund or whatever. And they wouldn't meet with him unless I came to that meeting. And he was a member of parliament and I was the Mayco member. And the funders questioned me about this land that I wanted to make available for affordable housing in Woodstock and Salt River. And was I going to bring shacks and tents to Woodstock and Salt River? And why can't this land be made available for private development? And so then I was asked to leave the meeting, and I don't know what happened with the funding donation. But so that's where funding influences policy. But he's completely wrong. The city has the power to assist with the unaffordability.
Okay.
And the approach now of just releasing land and announcing, look, we've released land and it's for affordable and social housing is problematic, even though that was something that I championed in 2017. In 2026, it's not working because the land has been released, but nothing's been built. And there is a pipeline of social housing projects that are waiting for funding, and there's no funding for them. So the promises of these 20,000 housing units that are going to be built in well-located areas is dependent on that funding, and none of them are funded. So I've veered from your question, but the duty to address the apartheid spatial legacy is twofold. It is to make sure that people can live in better located areas, but it's also to address the conditions where people are currently living. Sticking with the housing theme, we regulate short-term rentals, and that's a land use planning thing. That actually was changed by this Democratic Alliance government, the short-term rental problem where you have 70% of properties, apartments in the city center, Atlantic Seaboard, which are now exclusively used for short-term rentals, Airbnb and the like. So that needs to be changed through land use regulation. And it used to be the case. You could use You could rent out your apartment as a short-term rental for like 60 days in a year. That was it. Other than that, you had to occupy it.
Yeah.
The guest accommodation policy of the city of Cape Town said you could run a bed and breakfast, but you had to live in the house. So that starts to narrow down these opportunities, these get rich quick schemes through short-term rentals. So we must manage affordability through the legislation that's in place already. We need a tenants' rights charter where we are not, for example, a tenant is not paying the rates of a default landlord. I don't know if you know this story in Cape Town. If you're a tenant and the landlord's behind in their rates, and you go and buy 10 rands worth of electricity, 70% of it is taken to pay the landlords. So there's lots of problems in that tenant landlord space that I think needs regulating. We don't build the end to war. Instead, we take that money and we implement the project that I spoke about earlier, violence prevention through urban upgrade. If you think that violence is coming from informal settlements, let's upgrade them. And let's take 114 million rand that's been allocated for this war, and let's start incrementally building dignified formal housing along the N2 to start. A barrier can be a building. It doesn't have to be a wall.
Helen Zille is running for mayor of Joburg. If she wins, are Joburg people in CAC?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been tackling Helen lately because she's pointing out all these faults in Johannesburg.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, but you were mayor in Cape Town for 3 years. Okay, you led a coalition government, but it was a DA-led government. And then you were Premier of the Western Cape for 10 years. And for 10 years, you had an outright majority.
Yeah.
And you didn't fix the same things that you're pointing out in Johannesburg. She went to the hostels, the migrant labor hostels, and spoke about the terrible conditions.
Yeah.
I must take you to the hostels here on the Cape Flats. The terrible conditions that people live in, that if she was really cared about those conditions, she had 13 years to fix them, and nothing has changed. So I think people must just start to check her track record. You're sitting in a pothole in Johannesburg, and there's lots of potholes in Joburg. I go there. But I can take you to the Cape Flats where there are potholes just as bad, and your party in government has not fixed them. I don't know what that means.
Is Cape Town the best run metro?
You know what? I don't know what that means.
Ooh.
Yeah. Because for me, okay, so Cape Town's got clean audits. People don't understand that an audit process is the Auditor General taking a sample of your financials. Not that they don't audit everything.
Yeah.
So let me give you an example. During COVID, the city of Cape Town decided to set up a concentration camp, I'll call it. A whole lot of marquee tents in Strandfontein, just outside Mitchell's Plain, and they put all the homeless people, they rounded them up off the streets and put them in this place. I asked questions in Parliament about this homeless tent. I went there on the day. People were begging me, like from behind cages, please get us out of here.
Yes.
And so it was horrendous. It was absolutely horrendous. Doctors Without Borders, Human Rights Commission, everybody who went there said that this is a humanitarian disaster.
Yeah.
But the cost of it, that camp ran for 6 weeks only, was like 60 million rand. You could have bought a building and had a permanent place for homeless people to live in. Yeah. But you rented tents. The cost of the tent rental was 40 million rand for 6 weeks. So I reported it to the SIU, and they found that it was irregular, and that the company that rented the tents profited excessively, and that the money had to be recovered. But in that same year, the city of Cape Town got a clean audit, despite that finding. So when I say clean audits, we must be careful about how much emphasis we place on that. Is Cape Town well run? Probably. I think it is probably well run. It's got a good administration. It's got good professionals. It's got a government that's an outright majority, so it can implement a plan. So my question is, do you measure good, well run on clean audits and sound administration, or you look at those elements apparently good financials, an administration where people are professionally qualified for their jobs, a government that is outright majority, so stable. So why aren't they doing more? Why are they not using all those elements to prioritize the upgrade of all those informal settlements along the N2? Why is the crime so bad?
Right.
I mean, they've got 6 billion rand invested in crime. So if you've got all the elements in place, why are we not seeing the outcome that's different? So for me, it's well run doesn't. I don't understand how to answer that, but I look at what's the output, what's the outcome, and you've got all the fundamentals in place, but it's still shit out there.
In the interview that we did with Jordan Hill Lewis that you use on the TikTok, he said that we will never see the end of the housing backlog. Is he wrong?
Well, we will never see it if the Democratic Alliance and even the ANC and government don't change their approach to housing. So if we're going to use the same model for addressing the housing crisis, we're not going to see the backlog end anytime soon. We're not even going to see it reduce meaningfully. So currently in the Western Cape, for example, let's use Cape Town because you use Jordan Lewis. In Cape Town, there's 483,000 names on a housing demand database. They're going to build 1,337 this year. So no, we will not see the backlog if they continue this path. This is where, and your first question around, or your earlier question around well run comes in. Because for me, it's about choices. You can choose, you're choosing as a government to invest 6 billion rand in policing. Policing is not your mandate. You are only prepared to put in housing what National Treasury passes to the provincial government, which then passes you a portion for the city of Cape Town. The provincial government shares that housing funding. But you're not prepared to put one more cent in. So if you get 300 million rand this year, you'll build for 300 million rand unless you underspend. I'm saying we need a different model. Cape Town's got a good balance sheet. Apartheid cities used to build housing, high-rise buildings. I mean, I grew up in Durban. In Umbilo, there's a high-rise building with lifts for poor whites. They were built for poor white people. There's no reason why we can't finance as a city using long-term borrowings to build 60,000 housing units in the next 5 years. And we'll build them, and the tenants will pay rent, and the rent will cover the finance charges.
Yeah.
I'm simplifying, but there are models. But we will not address the backlog if we're going to continue on the path that both ANC and DA governments continue on. They do not see beyond the envelope of funding that they get to address housing. So they don't see housing as the crisis that it actually is.
You've said that the wall is there to hide the poverty and everything in the townships, but we can still see it from the sky when we land. Do you think that at some point they will announce the N2 roof project?
I thought you were going to say, are they going to build a dome or something?
Western Cape under a dome.
Yeah. And look, I mean, it's obviously a joke. They're not going to build a dome. But I mean, taking that argument to its logical conclusion, if you want to hide stuff instead of fix it, I guess you need a dome.